Hi, everyone. Welcome to America Meditating and the Next Normal. I'm your host, Sister Jenna. Each time we come together, we learn so much about what lives inside of our spirit, who we are, and what we're becoming. I used to always hear this saying, you become the thoughts you think. Sometimes that used to scare me. But now I have to say, I love the thoughts that, percolate in my consciousness. There's some that are not always of the highest quality, but I know that those thoughts are trying to push me forward. And even though they might not always feel comfortable, they're helping me. Can you imagine if every day you woke up and everything was just honky-dory and just golden aged and pure and peaceful? To be honest with you, I wouldn't mind. I think that would be awesome. But I wonder, would we get bored with it? Or will the soul have become such an embodiment of these virtues and qualities and pure vibration that it just lives out that legacy? I look forward to that. I know that everything operates on the basis of energy, and the law of entropy exists not only for nature, but also for our consciousness. Maybe we are now at that particular point where it's time to restore the soul and to come back to the heart of the matter. My special guest and friend, Sandy Hart, is an award-winning leader in the fields of women's empowerment and interfaith community building. She founded the Women's Interfaith International Grassroots organization called S.A.R.A.H, S-A-R-A-H, which stands for the Spiritual and Religious Alliance for Hope, to gather women of diverse faiths. She founded and served as the director of the Charter for Compassion's Women and Girls sector, served as the chair for the United Religions Initiative of North America, and serves on the Women's Task Force for the Parliament of World Religion. Sande is also the founder of Compassionate California and is currently being inducted into the Women's Oral History Library of Claremont Colleges. Her new book is titled The Liminal Odyssey, the alchemical power of the spaces in between. Please welcome Sandy to our show today. Sandy, thank you for contributing so much heart and compassion to a humanity that is thirsting for extra love wherever it can find it.
Thank you. And I can say the exact same thing for you, Sister Jenna. It's an honor to be here and to share this space with you. I'm honored.
Oh, welcome. Sandy, you've been quite busy with your organization that you formed, S.A.R.A.H, and your interfaith and community service and women empowerment activities. Can you elevate and tell me a little bit more about S.A.R.A.H and the inspiration behind it all?
Yeah, I'm honored to. S.A.R.A.H was my response to an impulse the morning of 9/11. I woke up to the same scene everyone else was watching on their televisions. And for me in Southern California, it was that morning, and we were waking up to that. I know that's not this case everywhere. And I heard gather women, and I heard it again. And before my feet hit the floor, I said yes. And then before I stood up, I said, what did I just say yes to? I was the director of sales and marketing for a major home builder. I was raising 2 middle school kids. I was getting up to take them to school, wondering, what are Muslim women doing with their children today? And so I had no choice but to say yes, because I'm Jewish. And I couldn't imagine if this was me, because now suddenly we know that it's probably Islamic terrorists. And so I didn't question the fact that I had no clue on what to do with the women once I gathered them, let alone where I was going to find them. But I kept following the yes until I had a living room full of women of diverse faith traditions, not just Muslim women. And we called ourselves S.A.R.A.H as the mother of all nations, not just the monotheistic understanding of who S.A.R.A.H was, but the mother of all nations. And we became the mother of our community in Orange County, California. And we went on to do community building work, showing up in our highest and deepest value systems. And that was our responsibility. And I considered our privilege to play that role in the community. And so we convened community events, community weekends of service. We were called on by universities to show up with panel discussions or co-create programming for the community. Because at the time, the world was hungering for that mother compassion, that motherly love, and that motherly direction, which I'm right now as I'm getting the same feeling I got that morning. It's like all my cells are saying yes. And that's and this month, but we celebrate it next month, is our 20-year anniversary.
Wow. You know, I'm still baffled at how we haven't learned from history. I just, and then I ask myself the question too, have I learned from the past? And I'd say yes, on many levels. I've learned, don't say that anymore like that. Don't do that anymore like that. And sometimes when I'm compelled, because the energy in me is so deep, and then I say I still need to do more work. And I wonder if that's the same for our collective humanity, that perhaps we're those young men feeling, and the people behind conspiring to do that. Something inside of them were like, no, don't do it. But they were just compelled to do it.
Dr. Rianne Eisler calls this the domination trance. This condition that society has created, this flow of where we don't question assumptions of the way things are. But when we start to when we start to practice awareness, reverent listening, paying attention to our behavior patterns that are so subversive that we're not even aware that we are walking in that path. And so, yes, and I'd love to share with you a little story about how I discovered where I needed to go to break that pattern and within myself, where I wasn't learning the lessons. You know, if I have about 200 books on my bookshelf, and every one of them is on, for the most part, with the exception of Gone with the Wind and some other classics, are about, you know, how to listen, how to retrain your brain, you know, compassion, a whole shelf alone on compassion implementation, and community building, and I can go on. Yet, why were these patterns still showing up in me? And I can say the same is true. You know, we've learned all these lessons. We've had war. Why aren't we learning? What are the conditions? What's the tap root of where, what's bringing it up again? How are we, you know, how we respond and react and walk in this world to circumstance. And for me, the story was when we were, and you were there as well in New York, with our mutual friend, Reverend Deborah Moldow. And we were on a train ride coming down from her home in upstate New York into the city. And I just got real vulnerable. And I said to Deborah, I said, I don't know why the same patterns of relationships continue to show up. And we know a lot of the same people. And there's been just this kind of consistent kind of issue that I've had with them at some level in terms of relationships. And I questioned judgment, I've questioned my behavior, and I just couldn't get my arms around it. And I didn't want it to continue happening. I mean, heavens, we're all in this piecework. We have to figure out how to get along. And she thought about it and almost jumped off the bench seat we shared and turned to me and said, I know why you needed to stay with me, because she had invited me to her home. She said, my angels have a message for you. You need to do some intergenerational work. There's some trauma that happened to you. And it could have been when last month, last year, it could have been when you were a child, or perhaps it was in your ancestral past. And she instructed me to go home, create an altar, light a candle, and start asking my ancestors questions.
How was that?
At first, I was answering my questions for my angels or my ancestors. And I do that sometimes. Sometimes I forget to get out of the way when I'm praying and open up for the answer. And as soon as I practice vulnerability in that moment, I started seeing that it wasn't just the trauma, but the behaviors that were a result of the trauma that my parents had experienced, how they responded to issues. and I just saw clearly. I saw it almost like a movie strip,
Yeah, it
just I
becomes
saw the
clear.
whole timeline. Oh, of course, my father had it really hard, and he's first generation American, but he was barely born in this country. My
Right.
grandmother almost gave birth to him on the boat over, escaping Nazi Germany. And my mother, very close, similar situation. So that cellular memory of always being on guard is, having to be prepared to fight, flight, or freeze, respond.
Sure.
Our autonomic nervous system, is
Yeah.
my mind is wired to respond to that
Yeah.
fear. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
wait, through my experience and practicing and studying pro-social psychology, I know I can regulate my nervous system. I can pay attention to those moments, that thin veil between crisis and action, circumstance and choice. And
Yeah.
go,
Yeah.
and there's the liminal space.
And that's what I love about our inner work that we do. And one of the things that I've often wished the mass media would engage in conversation is what is at the base of somebody who would do something like a 9/11, or who would be behind the conspiracy of initiating and funding something like that. In the same way how you are recognizing your emotions and your feelings, and you can see where it's being tapped into maybe some ancestral influence, or maybe something that happened to you in this lifetime incarnation. You're checking and you're trying to change it because you know there's a better you. And I just want to throw that out there to whoever might be listening. Maybe there'll be someone from the Pentagon or the State Department who might be really willing to begin to investigate some deep emotional energies. I know a lot of times they blame it on economy because there just isn't any money. These kids are really used as pawns, to fulfill some bigger cause. But we can go on with that. That's a whole different topic. Let's talk more about you and what else is going on. I'm curious to find out what was the catalyst for you becoming an interfaith activist. Was it because of 9/11, or you've been doing this for a while?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've always been fascinated with people. I've always been fascinated with what motivates people. And yet I've never quite known how to go about finding out. I always ask people questions about themselves, not what they did, but who they were. I wanted to know where they came from. I wanted to go into their homes to smell their smells and to see their home and how they lived. I loved to be invited to dinner just to see how they interacted. I was just fascinated with people. And I discovered through 9/11, which my angels threw me into. I didn't, like I said, I just said yes. And I'm like, oh, I get it. I was interested in value systems. I was interested in what motivates people at their belief system core. And that's what you get to do in interfaith work. It's a safe place to ask Muslim, my Baha'i, my Brahma Kumari, all my sisters and other sisters, what does your faith tell you about this, and how does that show up in how you live your life? And these were the conversations we've had. Our S.A.R.A.H, besides our programming out in the community, we had monthly meetings. We had over 200 monthly meetings, most of them in my living room, which was a little selfish of me because I just wanted their energy absorbed in my walls that my children were living in. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was always fun to go to everyone else's home, but people were comfortable coming to my home, which became the Hart Ashram, which was what everyone called it, which of course, who wouldn't want your home to be such a
Of course.
beloved place. But that was that I'm not sure that at some level that was the catalyst.
Yeah. Yeah. One
But it was
never knows. It's like a buildup. It's like a buildup, until it just has that critical mass effect where you feel like, yes, now it's time. California is so ahead of its time in so many ways. Tell us a little bit about Compassionate California, which you founded.
As I was studying what makes people tick and what motivates them and understanding more about the pro-social psychology of it all, and did some training and became friends with the head of the Center for Compassion and Altruism Research Education at Stanford, Dr. Jim Doty, and started learning about the effects of our mind on compassion and our body on compassion and compassion on our body and our mind, I got really fascinated on the power of compassion, and not the warm, fuzzy word that most people associate that word with. If you're doing compassion right, it's hard and prickly. It's difficult. It can be painful sometimes, because it invites us to look at the suffering, to some degree embody it, and to want to be a part of its healing. It's an action word. I call it a verb, even though the dictionary has it as a noun. It requires us to be mindful of our responsibility and our role. Sometimes that you don't have to do anything, right? So that could take a load off if you're thinking, well, I always have to do something if someone's suffering. If you can, yes, sometimes subtle activism is important. But so when I started following that thread, I started following those yeses and came upon the Charter for Compassion, this international organization that's, at the time, its core principle was to develop cities of compassion, to create that culture of compassion at a city level, where the mayor would affirm it, the city council would agree to it, the Department of Education, Health and Human Services, everyone would subscribe to this notion of the principles of the Charter for Compassion, which is an actual proclamation, an actual 4-paragraph declaration that was written by Karen Armstrong. And she won the first TED Prize for this. She won, I think, $100,000. And with that, they created the Charter for Compassion. So I thought, I was at a conference where I heard about the Charter for Compassion, City of Compassion movement. And I almost flew home without an airplane. I was so excited because this is what we're doing in our community in Orange County. So I convened our board and I said, let's do this. What do you think? But we couldn't decide whose city to do. And I thought, what if we all go to our own cities and work on it? And by the way, let's just do the whole state. And then we can go to the governor and go, look what's happening in our state. Look at this coherence. Look at this, this weaving of compassion. Now you can hold the root of this and support it, right? Not top down, but it's coming from the bottom up. Now this is actually where the top meets the bottom, and we can really create the first state of compassion in the world. And so
that's so wonderful, huh?
And it became a state of compassion. I full disclosure, about 6 years into it, I got pulled away. It also shouldn't have been a women's interfaith organization at the center of it. We were at the table, but I pulled back, and it was taken by a beautiful team that actually managed to get it to the governor's office. And there's a bill that was passed. And the first official state of compassion in the world.
That's
now
wonderful.
The real work begins. Now the real work begins.
You have to bring it here to DC. Now let's talk about your new book, The Liminal Odyssey, The Alchemical Power of the Spaces in Between. What is the story behind the title? And what is the Liminal Odyssey?
Well, besides being a very clunky title, I couldn't have picked a more tongue twister. Liminal means threshold. It means the place between here and there, between crisis and action, between circumstance and choice. It can be evolutionary, because I think we're in a liminal space right now in our evolutionary growth spurt. But it could also be just a moment between you hearing something, how you respond, what time you take in that space in between, what skills you employ, and then what your next move is. Architects refer to staircases and hallways as liminal space, but I had never heard this word before until Jean Shinoda Boland shared it with me, this amazing author who works on women's repowerment. And she just loves this word. And so now it's part of my consciousness. And for years, I've been urged by my friends to tell a story that happened to me in 1982 at the Rose Bowl amongst 100,000 people, where I inadvertently started a little movement. And
at the Rose Bowl?
100,000 people at a No Nukes rally 40 years ago, June 6th. And it was a No Nukes rally and music festival, and everyone who was relevant there since the 60s were, Bob Dylan and Joan Baez had this historic moment on stage. No one knew he was going to show up. Mr. Stevie Wonder was there, Fleetwood Mac. I could just go on and on and on. Anybody who was, that was a popular musician, and as well as activists and politicians and environmentalists. And they were weaving this day together, music, song, inspirational moment, music, inspirational moment, and so on. And the very beginning of the day, the MC came to the microphone and announced that she had just gotten a report from the parking lot. Someone left their dog in the car, and it's going to be a very hot day, and please go roll your windows down. And something just landed on me, and I'm like, oh no, right? And so I was, Reverend Jesse Jackson was the first to the microphone. I didn't hear a word he said because I'm concerned about the humanity of this dog. And so I started chanting in between, when there was a liminal space between the speaker and the band that was coming. What about the dog? What about the dog? What about the dog? And I was drowned out. Moment came again. What about the dog? Now my friends joined me. The next opportunity, our whole section started chanting. By noon, it was coming from the other side of the stadium. It went on for an entire day, until the MC had to come to the microphone right before Mr. Stevie Wonder was about to ask for some silence for prayer, and said, so you want to know about the dog? The dog is fine. And so I started telling this story when I didn't think I had another story of interest to tell one day, about 15 or so years later. And my friend who heard it said, you've got to write a book. And so I didn't have enough of a book to write. What am I going to write? How am I going to fill a chapter or a book? And I kept putting it down. And then around the same time as hearing this word liminal, I decided, what was going on inside of me that day at Peace Sunday? What was that liminal space? And how did I take it from a little crack into the Grand Canyon, into this odyssey that would reverberate in my life? And as I started writing about that and paying attention to the reverent listening, I coined the word timefulness. It's like mindfulness, but it requires that we are timeful. I started thinking about the synchronicities that started coming up for me as I'm writing, and 11 more stories poured out of me, and discovered that the universe, God, spirit, our angels talk to us in synchronicities.
Sure. And in subtleties too, very subtle, their communications.
That's what I consider taking the mundane to miraculous. The miraculous is in the mundane, the subtleness that we might just step right over. But no, you're stepping over a crack that's got a world of opportunity. And
did you ever title the book, What About the Dog?
Yeah, that was the working title. It's actually chapter 1, and a full site, because the book is out, I sent it to a friend. He said, did you see this? He did a little research about that day because he was about to do an event for Peace Sunday's 40th anniversary. And he shared with me a newspaper article that I had not seen until less than a year ago. And the title of the front page of the newspaper said, what about the dog? And under it, it said, most people came for the music. So this journalist was, frustrated, as was I, that most people were there for the music, but I was one of them too. That's what got me there, because I wasn't an environmentalist. I was 21 years old. I wasn't woke. I wasn't aware of my responsibility and the condition of the planet, except for the little bits we were fed in 1982 up to that point.
You've got that call, Sandy. You've got this call to allow the universe or the divine to touch you and to use you for service. And it seems as if wherever the call is, somehow you show up. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I'd be curious to find out what role trust would play in one's liminal odyssey.
I have an entire chapter on trust. The Trust Frequency is a book by Connie Baxter Marlowe and Andrew Cameron Bailey that transformed my life, and more so when I wrote the book. As a matter of fact, Connie was my frequency editor. She read the book and said, there are a few words that I suggest that you tweak just to raise the vibration. So I've been a student of Connie and Andrew's for a very long time. And trust requires vulnerability. And vulnerability requires trust. I consider it like a safety net. But we need that safety net because that net is really our Indra's net.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And
I agree.
and thank you for, acknowledging in me my willingness to answer the call. But this is what the book is about, demonstrating it's accessible to everybody. We all have that opportunity. And I think the privilege as well as the responsibility
Yeah.
to answer the call, because we all
That's
have
true.
a call. Yeah.
That is true.
Not
Haven't you
special.
noticed how sometimes those traumas, though, those traumas of the past have such an influence on the way we feel? I think Jung called it the shadow side. And when exploring the spaces in between, I mean, how do we manage those past traumas that do take up space?
As a matter of fact, the most memorable experiences I have are the traumatic ones, right? They're the ones that have created an imprint in me and have either shielded me from loving more or shown me why it's so important to love more. And I didn't discover this until I was writing the book. And to some degree of what Deborah launched me into with this understanding of generational trauma was that to have reverence for those moments and to say they make up all my beautiful parts. I needed that. I do a mapping in my workshops. I do a mapping of our lives, really our life experiences. And when you write down the experiences that were notable, and then you identify, and that includes the traumatic ones, not just the joyful ones. And you write down who was, who led you to that experience. And then you write down what you learned from it. And then you start drawing lines between them. You have the Syndra's net. And you can see that experience is really a reflective pearl between our storylines. It's necessary. I wasn't ready to write the book 15 years ago because I hadn't had those experiences, and a number of them were hard, that I victimized myself. Poor me, or why me? And that is another reason why I was reliving a lot of these behaviors and relationship patterns, because I wasn't having reverence for that. That part of that domination trance is thinking everything has to be pleasant.
Sure.
But as my son-in-law says, it's you got to feel all the feels. Yeah. And that's like sand in the oyster shell. We need that to refine ourselves. And it's hard. I know.
I think it's watching too many Disney movies where at the end the princess and the prince just ride off happily ever after. And we somehow have this notion that that's how every day of life is supposed to be. And when it's not, something is wrong with you. And in reality, it's not that something is wrong with you, but something is pushing you and helping you to move forward. Because sometimes we just get stuck, or we just get so comfortable in what is that we don't really do much about it. So with women, just transcending tremendously, what do you think is the role and responsibility of women during this evolutionary growth spurt that we're in?
We're on the tail end of Lionsgate, this portal, according to cosmologists, where the divine feminine has appeared. And according to the teachings of the Mayan calendar and most indigenous cultures, the staff has been handed to the feminine. And it's not just women that embody the feminine. And I'm glad you brought up Carl Jung. The anima and the animus, the divine feminine and the divine masculine that exist in in the men, in the male body and the female body, no matter how you identify. The role of women is to recognize we are the protectors of life. We're the givers of life. Our womb is the first ocean. We are the protectors of our community and our children in the next 7 generations. We first embody the divine feminine as our default mechanism, because we're the life-giving source. And so to honor that, and then to honor what it is we're here to do, the seed that's in our pocket, our divine marching orders, our divine task, our sacred assignment that our soul is here to show up with. Employ those conditions of the divine feminine, and pay attention, because our children and our neighbors and the checker at the supermarket, whoever we interact with all day long, is looking at us and watching how we behave, and that matters. And this is what I call it, or I don't call it, this is what is called enlightened self-interest. What I do for you, I'm doing for myself. The most selfish thing I can do for myself is to do for you in a way that serves me. And then we're all better. But women are, again, this is our default system.
Yeah.
If it's our mark,
I love that.
Orders.
The best thing I can do, I love what you said, the best thing I could do for myself. And what I was feeling as you said that was, the best thing I can do for myself is to elevate my consciousness, knowing that you will follow me too, that you will come with me too. Or the best thing you can do for me is elevate your consciousness so I can follow you too. And we can make the world a better place. I love that, the role of women are becoming, I guess we're becoming more recognized in terms of our capacity and just how much we do. I don't know if it will ever balance out in the way we're visualizing it, because I think at some level too, we're losing that awareness in us of the power of our femininity and our subtlety and our sweetness and our softness, which is also a great strength. And yet, when we enter into the world of corporate or business, we lose a lot of that, and we become a little bit aggressive. But I suspect maybe the next generation will balance it all out. Maybe the next generation will all become like deities and everything will be just perfect. So listen, I know we're coming to a close of our wonderful chit chat, and I'd love to find out if you've offered so much for us so far, but is there a main message that you'd like to leave with our audience today?
I think that we all are entrusted with a divine assignment. We all have power that is unfathomable, but a power that's infused with grace and love, one that is our true nature, and to get out of our way. And to do the work, it requires practice. Sacred listening requires practice. Awareness requires practice. Paying attention to assumptions requires practice. And the more you do that, the more subtleties you notice are actually miraculous. The things that seem insignificant become insignificance. This is a line from a beautiful prayer by a friend of mine who says, "It is the child in us that knows that to ask, where am I going and how do I get there, is to miss the crimson red rose growing out of the rock in the sidewalk." Stop and pay attention. How is Spirit talking to us? What do those synchronicities mean? And pay them reverence and watch it unfold, and employ the other skills that you already have. We all have, I'm sure, a plethora of skills, but practicing and acknowledging them together creates a coherence where they become more powerful than the some other parts. And that's a practice. And
Yeah, it
then
is a
make
practice.
it an odyssey.
Beautiful. Make it your liminal odyssey. Yeah, I love that. I'm going to start using that. Can you leave us with a website where individuals can find your new book and all the great work that you're doing?
Thank you. Yeah. The Liminal Odyssey, or liminalodyssey.com. And also, when you go through the website to buy the book, you get free shipping within the United States and a little gift. And it's also on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. And the audiobook's coming out. The audiobook should be out in the next week or two.
Oh, that's great. So it's liminalodyssey.com.
Yeah. Or you can just Google Sandy Hart, Sandy Hart. It'll
Okay.
be too. I know it's easier to spell.
It was great to be in your heart and to spend this time with you. Thank you so much.
I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Om Shanti.
Om Shanti.
So everyone, you had a chance to peer into the heart of Sandy Hart and just the journey of her Liminal Odyssey book, her latest release, and one of the many things that she does to amplify more wisdom and compassion to the world. Isn't it wonderful to be able to use your life to be of service in whatever way you can? Never think that you can't offer service, whether it's even through subtle activism, which is actually good wishes and pure feelings, or whether it's just through sometimes just being detached to not say something, knowing that if you were to say it, the situation would get worse. There's so many ways that you can apply your compassion, love, and liminalness to life and to really try to savor those spaces in between. Let's move out all of those traumas and stuff. I mean, one of the beauty of this journey is to be able to embrace these little stuck in moments, these shadows, the vices, the algae that we've gotten way too comfortable with. We're just too comfortable with the vices. When you become awakened, you realize, I don't want it anymore. So every day you just get rid of a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time. And one day we'll actually wake up and we'll see the beauty and the divinity that God sent us down here with. So thank you so much for joining us. And remember, no one can take away your happiness unless you give them permission. I suspect we're all here to love each other the same. And hopefully you're really excited about our new health supplement, Viome. If you go to americameditating.org and just click on the Viome page, you'll get to see how we're really participating in a breakthrough health process where we're looking at everyone's RNA instead of their DNA, and to see in what way certain foods are not making you very healthy. And that if you actually transformed using certain foods in your body, you just might come back illness for a very long time. So they're onto something big, and I'm glad to be a part of it. And so I'd hope that you can join me, try to get a kit, and let me know how you're feeling in a while. So take care of yourself and be nice and be good. And even if you're naughty, that's okay. Still love yourself anyway. And hopefully I'll get to see you again real soon. Thank you so much for joining us. Be well. Take care.